Hello and welcome to part 3 of the building of this very interesting Ladybird by Keelcraft. I've been pushing on and doing a couple of little bits and pieces off camera. Talking of off camera, you can see it's sublime to the ridiculous here, isn't it? That's the Junkmeister, which I've now fuel proofed, and I'll begin installing the engine fairly shortly to it. Anyway, back to this project. So what's come to light is a few inaccuracies in the printed out parts, and the first of these is actually the slots for the bearers. You can see there's quite some play in these now, and that's because I've had to remove material from both this former and this one, so that I can get the thrust angle correct, because as it is, the thrust angle was far too far downwards, but that can be sorted out. They're at the right angle now, and I'll pack the material that's been removed to get the required angle. So there'll be packing goes underneath there and on the top of the inner one, so that I can get the correct angle. That's not a big deal. And I've also made the box for the wing, and if I show you that slotting in now, it's quite a satisfying sort of clunk. There we go, that's one. And that's the second one. And I believe, well, the observation holes here are so they can line up elastic band which runs through there and pulls them in. They're never going to come apart, I don't think, but you know, belt and braces. It's a very similar technique to the one that's used on the Falcon, but on a much smaller scale, if you want to look back at that video. So they've been done. And what I propose to do now is get these glued in, and then I'll line up the front former so that that part of the fuselage can be done. You'll notice that this is still not pulled together. That's because it doesn't actually meet. It's held in the sort of that position because there's an interesting design to the fin area, and that'll be the next sort of main thing that I'll tackle. But I'm going to jig this up, get it set, and then we'll start pulling these in to the required shape. And for that, I think I will need to go to a building jig. Pausing there, back in a second. Here we go then. You can see now that the fuselage has been set up in this building jig, which is, although it's a very simple affair, is extremely useful. As you can see, F1 has been glued in place, and the engine bearers have been epoxied in too, now that we've got the angle right. And the engine, although it's not drilled out, sits nicely in there ready for the cowling, the subject of a separate video of course. And the purpose of this part is this really interesting, if I move the stand round so you can see, this really interesting tail structure. That's all just jerry-rigged. It's not actually glued at all, because it's a bit like putting together a three-dimensional jigsaw. Very complex. That only gets me part of the way, because I need to cut and alter the rear part of the fin to allow for a working rudder for the RC conversion. But just to keep things simple, I'm leaving it as it is. I've glued part of the fin together here, but the rest is all loose fitted. And by using the jig, I've been able to square everything up so that it's vertically correct, it's not tilted over, and the fuselage itself isn't pulled one way or the other, banana shaped. So what I propose to do now is to glue this in place as it is, and then start to put the cross pieces in on the top, lift it off the board and put the bottom ones in. Then I'll start thinking about how I'm going to have to excuse me, sorry, putting it out of focus, how I'm going to have to modify this rear section. But once this is in place, I think I've made big headway. So final check, I'll eye up down the board. I'm happy with that. It's vertical. I'm happy with these. So I'm going to glue these in place first, then this former, and then this will come off. It'll have a cross piece added and I'll glue that. That's my battle plan. I'm going to move this round slightly so I can get in to glue it, and you can still see me doing that. So, a little bit of glue. Double check before I apply glue. And there's Missy the cat coming to say hello. I know, we can hear. It's very tense, isn't it, Missy? I know. It's nice to have a helper in the workshop. Don't know how much of a help she is, but it's company. Right, there, that bit's glued, and that'll help enormously. I'm going to glue the fin here. And now I'm going to actually glue this in. Holding one's breath here. Managed not to stick myself to it. Right, now I can take this one out. It needs a cross piece adding, so let's do that. Believe it or not, that set of pliers is serving a purpose. It's holding everything in position. Mark that off. Whoops. Cut this one. Glue on here. And then put it back in here. I'll actually have to take a little bit off this. Let's see if I can get that fitted in. Now I just want to check for squareness. Is that a word, squareness? Yep, happy with that. And there we have it. That assembly, the bulk of it is now in place. Let's move back in so you can see. This is going to be an absolute nightmare when it comes to covering, but we'll face that problem when it arrives. There's a piece needs to be glued in here, I believe, which I'll do in a second. I'm going to need to cut another one because that one's broken. And then there are stringers added to this as well. Pause it there. I'll have a little think of the next stage and then we'll crack on. As you can see, I've now added this former in place, F6 I believe it's called, and I think before I lift it off the board it might be advantageous to add at least some of the stringers onto the top. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm conscious that I'm adding weight with every piece of wood, but I have to stick to the original design, otherwise it's no longer the Ladybird, is it? So let's see how we go here. Take that there and mark it. And I can line it up using this jig, which is obviously the whole purpose of it. Just line it up, making sure I'm happy with where it's running there. In fact, I'm going to measure it, why not? That's what rulers are for. So I'm going to measure across this point. .38. Oh, that's spot on there. Just shows that your eyes often, if it looks right, it is right. Touch of super glue on there. There it's set for a second before I add to the others. Glue this end one in. Of course, as well as adding weight, it's adding enormous strength, and it's going to ensure, as long as it's jigged up square, it's going to stay square. This is a much better idea in terms of adding stringers that they're sitting on the top of the former. They are actually marked. You can't see it on the other side. I'm not taking advantage of it, but it means that you don't get that hungry horse look when the actual cross members stick through between the stringers. You want a nice clean line, and because they sit below, they won't show through. So that's one added. Let's have a look how many more we've got to add. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing like overkill, is it? Should I just go with, could I get away with just one aside? Do you know, I think I could. Do I go with one? Or do I go with two? You see, if I go with the original design, I'm adding another 2 lengths of wood, which I think are totally unnecessary. But do I stick with the prototype? Oh goodness me, I'm going to stick with the original design. Decisions, Mark. Now this one needs to be bent up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to steam this off camera so I can get a bend in it and taper their edge so it can curve up, and we'll get a nice flowing line by doing it like that. So I'll just pause it there. There you go, that's been steamed to allow that bend, and I'm now simply lining it up and gluing it to the other formers. It's moving around in the jig here, but it's moving up and down and not from side to side, which is fine. It's holding it square, which I'm happy with, obviously. It's what we want. And what I'll do now is I'll pause this. We'll come back once it's fully strung up, and then we lift it off the board and we can see what it looks like. Upper stringers have now been completed. So let's take this off. There we go. Tail area's done, which I spent a lot of time scratching my head about. It's what's making this an interesting build. Obviously it's quite a unique design, but there we go. Whoop, the opposite way. Hope you can see that. Rather pleased where we're up to. Now the front cowling area needs to be done, and the area immediately behind that, the former's missing out of the kit for that, so I'll have to make one. Some stringing to be done underneath. I have to think about radio access before I complete this, and obviously the cross members need to be added here. 1, 2, 3 underneath. But I'm calling that the end of video number 3 for the fuselage, and I'm quite happy with where we've got up to. If you've enjoyed it up to now, please subscribe if you haven't done so, and you can enjoy the rest of the journey. And if you can give me a thumbs up, that helps spread the word via the algorithm for YouTube. Bye for now.